What if the most fundamental piece of financial advice you've ever received is silently steering you toward a retirement disaster? We're constantly bombarded with simple rules, catchy phrases, and quick tips promising to solve the single most complex financial question of our lives. How much do I actually need to save for retirement? It's a question that haunts people in their 20s and keeps those in their 50s awake at night. We crave a simple answer, a magic number, a single percentage that will guarantee us a future of comfort and security. And for decades, the financial world has offered up these rules of thumb like articles of faith. But what if these well-meaning guidelines, designed for a different economic era, are now dangerously outdated? What if following them blindly is like navigating a modern superhighway using a map from the 1970s? You might feel like you're making progress, but you're headed for an exit that doesn't exist anymore, or worse, straight into a wall. Today, we are going to tear down these old rules. We're going to explore two of the most popular retirement savings philosophies in Canada, dissect them piece by piece, and expose why, for anyone getting serious about their future, they are no longer enough. This isn't about scaring you, it's about empowering you. It's about moving beyond the comfortable simplicity of a rule of thumb and into the clarifying power of a personalized strategy. The comfortable lies of yesterday won't fund the reality of your tomorrow. The truth, however, just might. So, let's get started on the journey to discover what you truly need. To properly understand the challenge, we need to examine the competing philosophies that have shaped how generations of Canadians think about saving. On one hand, you have the classic time-honored advice, a concept so simple and elegant, it can be explained in a single sentence. Save 10% of your income for retirement. This idea has been the bedrock of personal finance for nearly a century. It's approachable, it's easy to calculate, and it provides a clear, consistent target. The beauty of this rule lies in its focus on habit formation. It teaches you to pay yourself first, to treat your future self as your most important bill. The idea is that by consistently setting aside this portion of your take-home pay, you create a savings muscle that strengthens over time. Through the magic of compound growth, these small, steady contributions are meant to blossom into a substantial nest egg over a 40-year career. It's a compelling and comforting narrative. On the other hand, a more modern and complex philosophy has emerged, one that attempts to grapple with the messy realities of modern financial life. This rule, let's call it the integrated formula, argues that retirement saving doesn't happen in a vacuum. It suggests that three major financial burdens, your mortgage payments, your retirement savings, and any large temporary life expenses, should all fit within a combined 30% of your pre-tax income. The logic here is that your financial life is an interconnected ecosystem. For example, the money you put toward your mortgage is, in a way, a form of forced savings as you build equity in your home, and certain huge costs, like childcare for young kids, are not permanent. They are intense for a few years, and then they disappear, theoretically freeing up massive amounts of cash flow that can then be aggressively redirected towards retirement savings in your later working years. This approach acknowledges that a young family struggling with a new mortgage and daycare costs might not be able to save 10%. It offers them a kind of permission to prioritize immediate crushing expenses, with the promise that they can catch up later. It is a formula born from an actuary's spreadsheet, designed to be mathematically sound over a lifetime. So we have two distinct paths: the simple, straight-line approach of saving a fixed percentage from day one, and the complex, variable approach that juggles priorities and backloads the savings effort. One preaches consistency, the other flexibility. One is a marathon at a steady pace. The other is a walk followed by an all-out sprint to the finish line. Both promise to get you to the same destination. But as we'll see, the journey matters just as much as the destination. And for many people, the path chosen can make all the difference between arriving in comfort and not finishing the race at all. My preference, especially for those just starting out, leans heavily towards the former, simpler approach, and the reasons for this become glaringly obvious when we move from the world of theory into the harsh light of reality. Let's first sing the praises of the 10% rule, because its value, especially in your early years, should not be underestimated. Imagine a 25-year-old, let's call her Sarah. She's just landed her first real job with a take-home pay of $3,500 a month. The 10% rule is beautifully clear. She needs to save $350 every month. It's a concrete number. She can set up an automatic transfer to her RRSP or TFSA and essentially forget about it. It's a manageable amount that likely still allows her to pay rent, cover her student loans, and have a social life. The most powerful part of this process isn't the $350 itself, but the psychological rewiring that occurs. She is building the habit of saving. She learns to live on 90% of her income. This becomes her baseline, her normal. As she gets raises and her income grows, her 10% contribution grows with it. But because she's always lived on the other 90%, she doesn't feel the pinch. Let's model this out. If Sarah saves that $350 a month, or $4,200 a year, from age 25 to 65, and achieves a modest average annual return of 6%, she would have over $690,000 by the time she retires. This is the magic of compound growth in its purest form. The money she invested in her 20s has 4 decades to work for her, and the earnings on her investments start generating their own earnings. The simplicity is what makes it so effective. It doesn't require complex calculations or life stage adjustments. It's a set-it-and-forget-it strategy that leverages the single most powerful asset a young person has: time. The philosophy is sound. Build the habit early, be consistent, and let time and the markets do the heavy lifting for you. It's a reliable blueprint for building a solid foundation. Even if 10% isn't the perfect number for every single person's ultimate goal, it is an absolutely fantastic starting point that puts you light years ahead of someone who does nothing. It's a proactive strategy that front-loads the effort when your expenses are typically lower and your runway is longest. Now, let's turn our attention to the integrated 30% formula. On paper, it seems sophisticated and realistic. It acknowledges the immense pressure of housing costs and family life. But when you apply it to the real world, especially in today's economic climate, it begins to fall apart, and the cracks it reveals are deeply concerning. The first and most glaring issue is the modern cost of housing. This rule was conceived in a time when a mortgage might have reasonably consumed 15 to 20% of a household's income. Today, in many Canadian cities, it's not uncommon for a mortgage payment, property taxes, and utilities to gobble up 30, 40, or even 50% of a family's pre-tax income. Consider a young couple in their early 30s with a combined gross income of $120,000. Under the 30% rule, their budget for their mortgage, extraordinary expenses, and retirement savings is $36,000 a year, or $3,000 a month. A mortgage on an average-priced townhouse or semi-detached home could easily be $2,500 a month or more. Add in an extraordinary expense like daycare for one child at $1,000 a month. Suddenly, their spending on just those two categories is $3,500 a month, already exceeding their entire 30% allotment. According to this rule, their retirement savings contribution should be zero. Not just for 1 year, but potentially for the entire decade they are in their 30s and 40s, paying down a large mortgage and raising children. This leads to the rule's most dangerous psychological flaw. It encourages the deferral of the savings habit. The formula might mathematically work out on a spreadsheet, where a 48-year-old who has just paid off their daycare costs can suddenly start saving 25% of their income. But humans aren't spreadsheets. If you spend 20 years of your adult life not saving a single dollar for the long term, you haven't built the savings muscle. You've built a spending muscle. You've become accustomed to your lifestyle consuming your entire paycheck. The idea that you can just flip a switch at age 48 and suddenly divert thousands of dollars a month from your lifestyle to your RRSP is, for most people, a fantasy. It's incredibly difficult to dramatically reduce your standard of living, and that's what this catch-up strategy demands. Lifestyle inflation is a powerful force, and a plan that ignores this behavioral reality is a plan that is built to fail. Furthermore, this backloaded strategy is incredibly fragile. It requires so many things to go right for you in the second half of your career. It assumes your income will continue to grow steadily. It assumes you won't face a job loss or a disability in your peak savings years. It assumes you won't get divorced, a life event that can be financially devastating. It assumes you won't need to help an aging parent or have another child later in life. It assumes the market will deliver strong returns precisely when you finally start investing your large sums of money. The plan has no margin for error. If you delay your savings until your late 40s and then the market goes into a multi-year slump, you don't have the decades needed to recover. You are banking your entire retirement on a perfect 10 to 15-year run, and life is rarely that cooperative. The simple, consistent 10% approach is far more robust. It can withstand job losses, market downturns, and life's curveballs because the foundation was built early, and the bulk of the final nest egg comes from decades of compound growth, not a last-minute Herculean effort. This is the critical turning point in every person's financial life. There comes an age where the comforting simplicity of any rule of thumb, whether it's the 10% rule or any other, ceases to be a useful guide and becomes a dangerous liability. In my experience, this transition point happens around age 45. Before that, rules of thumb are great. They get you in the game, they build habits, they get your capital working. But as you cross the threshold into your late 40s and 50s, you are no longer in the accumulation game. You are in the planning game. The stakes are higher, the timeline is shorter, and the variables are far more personal. Why did these rules stop working? The biggest factor is the brutal math of time. The power of compounding is heavily front-loaded. A dollar invested at age 25 is exponentially more powerful than a dollar invested at age 55. Let's illustrate this with a stark example. Imagine two people. Person A starts saving $5,000 a year at age 25. She does this for just 10 years, and then, at age 35, she stops saving completely, never adding another penny. Her total contribution is $50,000. Person B gets a later start. He begins saving at age 35, and he saves the same $5,000 a year. But he does it consistently for 30 years until he retires at age 65. His total contribution is $150,000, 3 times what person A put in. Who has more money at age 65? Assuming a 7% average annual return, person A, who stopped saving at 35, will have approximately $790,000. Person B, who saved 3 times as much money for 30 straight years, will have only about $510,000. Let that sink in. Person A's money had an extra 10 years to grow, and that head start was so powerful that person B's massive sustained effort could never catch up. This is why a simple rule of thumb like save 10% is insufficient as you get older. If you haven't been doing it, you can't just start at 45 and expect the same result. You have lost your most valuable asset, time. You don't have enough runway for the compounding engine to reach full throttle. Your savings capacity, the sheer percentage of your income you'd need to save to catch up, becomes impossibly large. Your retirement outcome is no longer about a simple percentage. It's about a detailed, personalized calculation. Once you're in your near-retirement years, a generic rule becomes useless because your situation is no longer generic. Your financial life has a unique history and a specific set of circumstances that a simple percentage could never account for. Let's explore some of these critical factors. First, your housing situation. At 25, you are probably renting with roommates. At 55, you might own a large family home. The rule of thumb doesn't care, but your retirement plan must. Do you plan to sell that big house and downsize, unlocking a huge chunk of tax-free capital that could fund a large portion of your retirement? Or do you plan to age in place, meaning you need to budget for rising property taxes, insurance, and the inevitable costly maintenance of an older home for the next 30 years? The answer to that single question could change your required savings number by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Your debt profile is another massive variable. A 25-year-old's debt might be a manageable student loan. A 55-year-old might have a mortgage, a line of credit from a kitchen renovation, a car loan, and maybe even debt from helping their kids. The question is no longer just about saving, it's about a debt repayment strategy. Will you carry that debt into retirement, meaning your retirement income will be servicing interest payments? Or will you focus on an aggressive plan to be completely debt-free by the day you retire, which might mean temporarily diverting funds from savings to debt repayment? A retiree with no debt has a dramatically lower cost of living and far more financial freedom than one who is still making payments on a 20-year-old home renovation. This requires a specific, tailored plan, not a general rule. Of course, the biggest factor of all is your past savings history. By the time you're 50, a rule of thumb that tells you how much to save going forward is ignoring the most important part of the equation. What do you already have? You might have been a diligent saver, and thanks to some good luck in the markets, you might have a nest egg that is far larger than you ever anticipated. You might actually be in a position to save less, not more. Conversely, you might have had some bad luck, made some poor investment choices, or simply not had the capacity to save. You might be starting from a much lower base. A flat percentage doesn't account for this history. Your path forward is entirely dependent on your starting point today. This is why a reevaluation becomes so crucial. You need to take stock of where you are, not just where a rule says you should be. The concept of periodically reevaluating your plan as your life changes is absolutely vital, but it becomes most critical in these later years when you have a significant financial history to consider. Your marital status profoundly changes the retirement equation. For a 25-year-old, planning is usually a solo affair. But for a 50-year-old, the picture can be vastly different. A married couple often benefits from economies of scale, where their combined expenses are less than double that of a single person. If both partners work, they have two streams of income, two potential company pensions, and two future CPP and old age security entitlements. This creates a much more resilient financial base. Furthermore, our pension and tax systems offer incredible strategic advantages to couples. The ability to split eligible pension income, or RRIF income after age 65, is a powerful tool. It can allow a couple to minimize their overall tax bill and, critically, help the higher income spouse avoid the dreaded OAS clawback. A single person doesn't have these options. They bear the full weight of their expenses and have fewer opportunities for tax optimization in retirement. Therefore, the amount a single person needs to save to achieve the same lifestyle as a couple can be dramatically different. Your plan must reflect your specific household structure. And then there are the kids. While a rule might vaguely account for the cost of raising them, it rarely grapples with the evolving financial relationship between parents and adult children. Will your kids be financially independent when you retire? Or will you be part of the bank of mom and dad, helping with a down payment for their first home or funding a wedding? These are no longer extraordinary short-term expenses. They can be major, planned capital outlays that happen right in your peak pre-retirement years. These goals need to be planned for specifically. On the flip side, once your kids are truly independent and have moved out, your expenses might drop significantly. The cost of groceries, car insurance, and utilities will change. Your vacation style might shift from expensive trips for 5 to more modest travel for 2. A proper retirement plan doesn't just project your current expenses forward. It helps you realistically model what your lifestyle and spending will actually look like in that next chapter of life. This requires introspection and detailed cash flow analysis, not a simplistic percentage. Ultimately, all of this boils down to one inescapable conclusion. As you get closer to your retirement date, your financial plan needs to evolve from a generic rule to a personalized, detailed roadmap. It needs to account for your job, your specific income potential, your defined benefit pension or lack thereof, your health, your family's health, your goals, and even your vision for how you want to spend your time and money. Think about how you spent your time and money in college versus how you do now. It's a world of difference. The same level of change will happen between now and your retirement years. Rules of thumb are the starting pistol. They are fantastic for getting you off the blocks in your 20s and 30s, but they are not the map for the entire race. To navigate the complex terrain of your 40s, 50s, and 60s, you need a GPS, a specific, dynamic, and responsive plan. You need to take all these unique variables, your housing, your debt, your savings, your family, and your goals, and build a real financial model. This is how you move from the anxiety of the unknown to the confidence of a well-charted course. It's about taking control, understanding your unique numbers, and building a strategy that is as individual as you are. That is the true path to retiring with confidence. Canada Pension Vault.